it occurs. And whenever we see bad leadership, I see that there's one thing that is in common across the board, and that's distance. Whenever there is bad leadership, the leaders are distant from their people. Now, bad leadership occurs, and there are many different aspects to it, but distance is the one that really goes across the board. Now, we talked about earlier distance. We talked about how some of the leaders in these areas just don't quite understand what's going on with their people. It's the whole premise of the show. I don't know if you've seen it, the show Undercover Boss. Yes? I love that show. The whole premise of the show is they take an executive of a company and they give them this disguise. It's kind of like the olden days where they have like the brown trench coat and the hat with the newspaper kind of a thing, you know what I mean? They take these companies' executives and they give them this disguise and they send them out into the field with the people to live a week in the life of what their people live. And I'm amazed to see how distant some of these leaders are from what it takes to actually run their companies. There was an episode on a couple of weeks ago with Mitchell Modell of Modell's Sporting Goods. If you're not from the Northeast, you may not know what Modell's is. Modell's is a large sporting goods chain in the Northeast that's a lot like a Dick's Sporting Goods that you would see around here, like a Dick's or a Sports Authority, right? So the big warehouse kind of place with, the sporting equipment everywhere. It was a family business that was started in Brooklyn, and Mitchell was the son of the founder. He had taken over the company, and for years, he had been pounding his managers about the P&L. It's all about the profit and loss statement, right? It's all about the bottom line. Well, over time, his managers kind of got to the point where they did all that they possibly could. And he kept pressing them, cut costs, cut costs. Doesn't matter what you do, cut costs. And what he was starting to see in the financial statements were some of the shortcuts that they were taking. But he had no idea, because all he was focused on was that piece of paper with the numbers on it. He didn't know what his people were going through until he went on the show. They shaved his head, they gave him this big walrus-looking mustache. It was really quite funny. And they got him out into the field with his people, and he was amazed. He had no idea the shortcuts that were taken, and he was outraged that those shortcuts were taken. With inventory, with customers, with hiring practices. They weren't getting the right people to staff the stores. I mean, you name it, and it was going wrong. And it's all because he drove it. He was so distant, he had no idea what was going on. Now, a lot of times, leaders are distant out of fear, arrogance, or ignorance. And we heard that ignorance topic come up a little bit earlier in the discussion. Now, arrogance is something that we as leaders all need to be very careful with. Because arrogance starts with confidence. And if you're a leader and doing what you're doing, chances are pretty good that you're confident in what you're doing, or else you wouldn't be leading to begin with. But what happens when leaders do good things and things go well? People will tell you about it, right? You'll get compliments. So when compliments are added to your confidence grows, which leads to more compliments, then your confidence grows even more. More compliments, more confidence. You see where it goes? And it's this inflation of confidence that adds to the arrogance. It leads to arrogance. Now, there are some leaders who are distant because of ignorance. And ignorance is one that I see as the most curable. Again, in the discussions earlier, we talked about it being a matter of education. Ignorance can be cured by education. But the leader needs to be willing to be educated, right? And this is where arrogance can also come into the equation with this particular topic as well. If you're too arrogant to want to learn about somebody, you're not going to. So you're going to remain ignorant to what they're going through. Now, I'm no stranger to ignorance, okay? I grew up in a little state called New Hampshire, and all I knew growing up was that everybody looked like me, walked like me, talked like me, dressed like me, you name it. It was like the modern-day Mayberry, okay? To give you an example, before I came to Florida, growing up, my thought of a Floridian was somewhere between Larry the Cable Guy and Betty White. Just imagine their offspring, and that's kind of what I pictured. Now, ignorance is a big issue, and it really drives a lot of what we're talking about today. But really, the arrogance and ignorance lead into the distance that we see. Those are some of the underlying reasons why these leaders that we've been talking about today are distant from their people. So do we see where the distance comes from? You see how this is an issue in the macro sense when we talk about countries, but also how it's important for us? So when I asked you to move forward, you can understand now why I asked you to move forward. Distance causes issues, right? Now, in order to see how to be successful in our careers and in what we do as a chapter, we need to look at the opposite of bad leadership, right? I mean, we don't want to do those bad things. We don't want to be distant. We want to be connected. Strong leadership, and the cure to everything that we've been talking about today, is connection. It's about the leader being connected and understanding what's going on with his people.